this is Summer Lynn from Chicago, Illinois. Just wanted to give a huge shout out to the Relay for all the love and support they've given my team and I. And make sure you stay tuned for all the latest boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Well, more on this. Per tweet from The Athletic, new. Bob Arum doubles down on Terence Crawford comments from this weekend. I'm no longer in the business of losing money on Terence Crawford. An excerpt from the article reads, the harshness of Arum's comments is surprising considering Crawford's skills. I don't give a shit if Team Crawford got mad at me. This business is not about getting mad. This business is about facts and the reality of the situation, Arum said. What did I say that was wrong? I'll show him how much we've lost on his fights. Again, if we did this fight with Spence and put our money in for half of the risk and Crawford wins and Heyman wants to sign him, be my guest, for Christ's sake. In other words, I'm not going to go in my pocket anymore for Terence Crawford. I don't have to make a lot of money with him on this Spence fight, but I know I'll break even or make a couple dollars. I'm no longer in the business of losing money on Terence Crawford. And let me tell you something. I don't think that Bob Arum is lying when he says that he's lost money on Terence's fights, that Terence Crawford is a fighter who he invested in, and he hasn't gotten a return on that investment. I don't doubt for a second that Bob Arum is telling the truth because, well, Crawford's contracted minimum, his contracted minimum purse, is something to the tune of $4 million, roughly $4 million per fight. He actually got a little more than that for the Amir Khan fight. Better still, this is what it costs Top Rank every time that Crawford sets foot in the ring, and they still haven't gotten a return on that investment. The disconnect here is that it's not Terence Crawford's fault. It's not Terence Crawford's fault that his fights are costing Bob Arum and Top Rank money. You guys decided to take the risk in investing in this guy.
You did that.
Knowing that it was an Errol Spence Jr. fight you were after. It was an Errol Spence Jr. fight you were hoping to make between Terence and Errol. You decided to invest in Terence knowing that that's what you were after, and you decided to invest in Terence knowing that your working relationship with Al Heyman and the PBC isn't exactly a good relationship. But you decided to invest in Terence Crawford anyway. You decided to take on those risks. It's not Terence Crawford's fault things didn't work out the way that you wanted them to.
You made your bed, now you have to lie in it.
You guys are the ones who decided to re-sign Terence Crawford. You guys are the ones who decided to offer him a bigger contract minimum when his previous contract was up. You guys decided to do that. That's on you. That's the risk that you decided to take, knowing the fight you want to make involves a PBC fighter, an Al Heyman fighter. You guys decided to take on those risks, and if things didn't work out the way you wanted them to, I reiterate, it's not Terence Crawford's fault. In some ways, it's not yours either.
You couldn't force Errol Spence into the ring.
You couldn't force Errol Spence Jr. to have that fight on your time because Errol Spence Jr. isn't fighting on your dime. Terence Crawford is.
Or was.
In September of 2018, Terence Crawford signed a contract extension with Top Rank Promotions. That was ahead of the Jose Benavidez Jr. fight. That fight brought in both Top Rank and ESPN the best ratings for any combat sport, not just boxing, mixed martial arts as well. That fight brought in the best ratings for any combat sport that whole year. This year, Terence Crawford brought in Top Rank some of the best ratings for any boxing match that took place this entire year, this last weekend with the Kell Brook fight. Yet it sounds a lot like Bob Arum is venting his frustrations and taking them out on Terence Crawford, saying that he needs to promote himself more. He needs to be more like this guy or more like that guy because he's costing me money.
I don't doubt that he is.
But you can't take this out on him because it's not his fault. His current situation is not of his own doing, and he alone cannot remedy it. It takes two to tango. It takes two guys to make a fight, but it only takes one to fuck it up. The truth of it is that a lot of attention is going into Bob Arum's candor. A lot of attention is being aimed at how Bob Arum chose to put it. Bob Arum, who is so obviously venting his frustrations. But what if I told you that whether Bob Arum said this stuff or not, whether he said what he meant in a nice way or a not so nice way, what if I told you the Terence Crawford situation would still be the same regardless of what Bob is saying? What if I told you that what Bob is saying here and now doesn't have the least bit of bearing over Terence Crawford's current situation? What if I told you that? What if Bob never said what he said? about Terence Crawford. Do you think that that would change? Do you think that would improve upon Terence Crawford's current situation? Do you think it would have made the least bit of difference if Bob never said this stuff?
It wouldn't.
Remember what I told you in my previous video? Me and you ain't the ones flipping the bill for Terence Crawford's fights. Bob Arum is. So he has cause for concern. He has a reason to be frustrated. Me and you don't. But I think what Bob Arum fucked up at, essentially, is it sounds a lot like he's taking it out on Terence Crawford, and I reiterate, none of this is Terence Crawford's fault. If you want to sever ties with this fighter, you can. If you want to pull out of the welterweight division, if you want to release Terence Crawford from his contract early before it costs you any more money, you can do that. You can do all those things because business, after all, is business.
I can understand that.
You tell yourself, we've invested millions in Terence Crawford, and he's costed us millions already. His contract isn't set to expire till October of next year. In that time, he could end up costing us millions more dollars. That's the reality of it. You tell yourself these things.
Right.
You look at the landscape and you tell yourself, we're nowhere near close to that Spence fight. So long as Terence Crawford is a top-ranked fighter, the PBC ain't going to want to make that fight with us. So maybe the best thing for us to do is to let Terence Crawford go. There's been a lot of speculation as to what Terence Crawford is going to do once his contract is up. Would he re-sign with Top Rank? Would he want to? Moreover,
Does he even have that option?
I'll tell you the truth. It's a difficult situation for Top Rank, and it is a difficult situation for Bob Arum because they've invested millions in this fighter that they haven't gotten a return on yet. So it is a difficult situation, and that much I can understand. But the situation is made uglier based on Bob Arum's comments that don't put it on this kid that things worked out the way that they did. You took on those risks. You decided to invest in him hoping that you can get an Errol Spence Jr. fight, knowing that it would require you to work with Al Heyman, and you know what your relationship with Al Heyman is like.
Don't put it on Crawford.
The friction between Bob Arum and Al Heyman predates Terence Crawford signing that contract extension with Top Rank in 2018. Bob knew what he was getting himself into, and maybe he's experiencing buyer's remorse. But even if he is, that's not Terence Crawford's fault. Now, make no mistake, I do happen to think that Bob Arum is mishandling this situation. I do think that in venting his frustrations openly, he's not doing himself or his company's public image any favors, as this will leave people asking, is this how top-ranked fighters are treated? Is this how Top Rank treats its fighters, its pound-for-pound champions?
Yeesh.
Most people aren't going to understand what's going on here or what Bob Arum is actually frustrated about. They're going to look at this and tell themselves that Bob Arum is essentially ragging on his own fighter. He's blaming his fighter for not promoting himself when that's supposed to be his job. That's how people are going to look at it. That's how they're going to interpret this. When the truth is, Top Rank didn't actually fail to promote Terence Crawford. They didn't. How could you say that? He had the most watched fight of 2018 and one of the most watched fights in 2020. And those were two opponents who weren't high-profile guys, yet people tuned in to see Terence Crawford in the millions. Under Top Rank, Terence Crawford became a two-time lineal, three-division, undisputed champion. That's what being promoted by Top Rank did for Terence Crawford. It got him those opportunities to showcase those skills at the highest level.
They didn't fail to promote him.
It's not what happened, and that's not what's happening here. What's happening here, put simply, is Terence Crawford is being frozen out because Top Rank, well, they don't hold all the contracts in the welterweight division. It's not solely on them to put Terence Crawford in the kind of fights that he needs to be in to showcase his skills.
It's not.
In order for that to happen at 147 pounds, they got to work with the PBC. Rather, the PBC has to be willing to work with them.
And they haven't wanted to when it comes to this fight.
Top Rank did not fail to promote this fighter. They didn't fail to promote Terence Crawford. Under Top Rank, he became one half of the welterweight division's mega fight, the most sought-after fight the division has to offer. He became the other half of that fight under Top Rank. You know Terence Crawford wouldn't be deprived of the necessary fights he needs if Top Rank had the run of the place. Obviously not. He'd have access to all the fights with all the fighters he needs to fight if Top Rank had the run of the place. Hell, if the division were full of Golden Boy fighters or Matchroom fighters, there would still be a very good chance that Terence Crawford would get to participate in the legacy fights he needs to participate in. But that's the problem. The division's not full of top-ranked fighters, a Golden Boy fighters, a Matchroom fighters, a Queensberry Promotions fighters, or even main events fighters.
It's not.
The division's not full of those fighters. You know what the division is full of? PBC fighters. That's why Bob Arum wants out. That's why Bob Arum is frustrated, because he knows he's not going to get a return on this investment. And what he wants to do is cut his losses.
Cut Crawford loose.
Let him go. Go try his chances over there on the PBC side of things. See if that helps him get that Errol Spence Jr. fight, because Top Rank, they can't do nothing else for him. And that's what saddens me about all of this. That Terence Crawford might very well end up on the PBC side of things. And on that side of things, I just don't know what will become of him. You know, as soon as Regis Pregarius decided to go over there, is it a coincidence that this guy blew the goddamn weight for the Juan Heraldez fight? Soon as the guy got over there, he blows the goddamn weight. Look at David Benavidez. The first time he loses his belt as a result of treating his nose, and the second time he loses his belt as a result of blowing the goddamn weight. Lest we forget Mr. Big in the Britches, Errol Spence, his DWI. This guy unifies 2 world titles in the welterweight division and decides he's gonna go flip a Ferrari.
These guys are just unprofessional, man.
Get a look at the condition of fighters like Gervonta Davis and Adrian Broner between fights. Get a look at those guys. Get a look at the former unified champion Keith Thurman, injury-prone and ballooning in weight. According to Keith himself, the guy got up to 171 pounds.
The guy's sparsely active, so that's gonna happen.
The only thing those guys on that side of the street care about is the bag. And, you know, prize fighters are obviously going to be concerned with the prizes. I mean, that comes naturally. But there are fighters like Terence Crawford who are more than just prize fighters, more than just pugilists. They're legacy fighters. And I fear what would happen to a legacy fighter who ends up on the PBC side of the street. So I'm going to tell you something right now. I can care less what you think about Bob Arum's comments. The reality of it is, PBC fighters don't have the work ethic of top-ranked fighters. On the PBC side of things, what you got is a bunch of goddamn debutantes. That's what you got. Whereas on the top-ranked side of things, you've got champions and what could be pound-for-pound legends like Terence Crawford. PBC fighters ain't got the work ethic of top-ranked fighters, and I'm afraid of what will happen to Terence Crawford's work ethic if he ends up on the PBC side of things.
I really am.
But it's looking more and more, tweet by tweet, story by story, headline by headline, that Terence Crawford may just have to go over there for that Errol Spence Jr. fight, that he might have to. I mean, if he went to Matchroom, that wouldn't be any better. I don't think this is a situation that even Fast Eddie can fix. Ultimately, the PBC has got the run of the place.
They do.
The problem is that crossing over to the PBC side of things is no guarantee that he gets the fights that he's looking for. I mean, it really isn't. There are guys and have been guys on that same side of the street who never fought each other. The welterweight division, as it were, has left a bad taste in my mouth the last couple of years. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the glamour weights in the sport of boxing, but there's nothing glamorous about what's been going on here. The competitive element of the welterweight division has been sapped by the politics of boxing. I wasn't interested in seeing Errol Spence Jr. lock horns with a chubby lightweight in Mikey Garcia. And while the Sean Porter fight was a good fight, that wasn't the fight that the fans were asking for. That wasn't the unification match that was in demand. This division has become a very frustrating division to keep up with, and frustration is what we're seeing from Bob Arum. Frustration is what we're seeing from Terence Crawford.
Both of them.
Now those guys have got a rift between each other. Now there's a wedge between the fighter and his promoter, and that is as a result of the state of the welterweight division. Bob's losing money trying to promote Terence Crawford, trying to get a return on that investment, a return that he won't get until that Spence fight is made. But that Spence fight ain't gonna get made so long as Terence Crawford is on the top-ranked side of things. So Bob, he doesn't have a choice. He has to cut him loose, and he's obviously not happy about it. He's obviously not happy that he's not going to get a return on the money he's already invested, but that's the situation.
If he feel that way, you know what I mean, he can release me now. You know what I mean? Like, he can just release me. If you feel like you don't have no, you know what I mean, I'm not an asset to your company anymore, you know what I mean, you can release me right now. You don't have to wait till after a Spence fight? Why do you have to wait till after a Spence fight? You know what I mean? Release me now, then you don't have to lose any money no more. You know what I mean? If I'm such of a loss, a headache, you know what I mean? Like,
how important at this point in your career, Bud, is the Errol Spence fight? Like legacy fights.
It's not that important. I keep telling
important.
everybody it's not that important. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need Errol Spence for my legacy. I don't know why people trying to make it seem like I need Errol Spence. He need me. I don't need him.
And that's yet another problem this fight is facing. Per tweet from Michael Benson, Errol Spence on potential Terence Crawford fight, I definitely should get the bigger share. I'm not going to say what Bob Arum said recently, but proof is in the pudding. Who's the bigger draw? He's a great fighter, but I feel like 60-40, that's the right price. In reference to that proposed split, Shannon D. Grice Jr. said 60-40 is reasonable, bud. Spence has more belts and is the bigger draw, to which Terence Crawford replied, you stupid. You one of them guys. You know how many belts I've won? How many have he won? Then come back to me. It's crazy when somebody tells you to take less money when you're putting your life and health on the line. But I bet if I went to any one of y'all's jobs and said cut they pay and pay them less, y'all cry a river and say y'all need a new job. So shut that stupid shit up.
So he wants a 50-50 split?
As if this fight didn't have enough problems already. These guys can't agree on the split. Look, I think 60-40 makes sense, I do. I think that in this situation, Errol Spence Jr. has sold more pay-per-views than Terence Crawford. He's currently in possession of more world titles than Terence Crawford, even though Terence Crawford has held more world titles overall in this division against Errol Spence. He's got 2 world titles to Terence's 1, so 60-40 does make sense, but not to Terence Crawford. This fight has been riddled with problems from the very beginning, and I think that as a boxing fan, I just have to give up on this one. Terence Crawford wants half the pot. Errol Spence Jr. says otherwise. If the politics of boxing weren't already stopping this fight from happening, a disagreement on what the split should be.
That'll do it.
I'm going to ask you guys out there in the boxing cosmos. Do you guys have any hope left of seeing this fight materialize? Do you have any hope left of seeing this fight get made, given everything that's going on right now?
Everything we're seeing.
Do you honestly feel in your heart of hearts that this fight can still happen? Or has it become so frustrating that you don't even want to talk about it anymore? You don't want to waste any more time on it?
It's not worth losing sleep over.
This really is a black eye on the sport of boxing. I mean, it really is.